Respiration in aquatic insects. Aquatic insects need oxygen too. They are equipped with a variety of adaptations that allow them to carry a supply of oxygen with them underwater or to acquire it directly from their environment. Cuticular respiration. Many aquatic species have a relatively thin integument that is permeable to oxygen and carbon dioxide. Diffusion of gases through this body wall, cuticular respiration, may be sufficient to meet the metabolic demands of small, inactive insects, especially those living in cold, fast-moving streams where there is plenty of dissolved oxygen. Larger insects, more active ones, or those living in less oxygenated water may need to rely on other adaptations to supplement cuticular respiration. Biological gills. A biological gill is an organ that allows dissolved oxygen from the water to pass, by diffusion, into an organism's body. In insects, gills are usually outgrowths of the tracheal system. They are covered by a thin layer of cuticle that is permeable to both oxygen and carbon dioxide. In mayflies and damselflies, the gills are leaf-like in shape and located on the sides or rear of the abdomen. Fanning movements of the gills keep them in contact with a constant supply of fresh water. Stoneflies and caddisflies have filamentous gills on the thorax or abdomen. Dragonflies differ from other aquatic insects by having internal gills associated with the rectum. Water is circulated in and out of the anus by muscular contractions of the abdomen. This rectal gill mechanism doubles as a jet propulsion system. A sudden, powerful contraction of the abdomen will expel a jet of water and thrust the insect forward, a quick way to escape from predators. Breathing tubes. Although many aquatic insects live underwater, they get air straight from the surface through hollow breathing tubes, sometimes called siphons, that work on the same principle as a diver's snorkel. In mosquito larvae, for example, the siphon tube is an extension of the posterior spiracles. An opening at the end of the siphon is guarded by a ring of closely spaced hairs with a waterproof coating. At the air-water interface, these hairs break the surface tension of the water and maintain an open airway. When the insect dives, water pressure pushes the hairs close together so they seal off the opening and keep water out. Water scorpions, Hemiptera, Nepidae, and rat-tailed maggots, larvae of a syrphid fly, are two more examples of aquatic insects that have snorkel-like breathing tubes. Many aquatic plants maintain their buoyancy by storing oxygen, a waste product of photosynthesis, in special vacuoles. A few insects, e.g. larvae of Mansonia spp. Mosquitoes, insert their breathing tubes into these air stores and obtain a rich supply of oxygen without ever swimming to the surface of the water. Air bubbles. Some aquatic insects, diving beetles, for example, carry a bubble of air with them whenever they dive beneath the water surface. This bubble may be held under the elytra, wing covers, or it may be trapped against the body by specialized hairs. The bubble usually covers one or more spiracles so the insect can breathe air from the bubble while submerged. An air bubble provides an insect with only a short-term supply of oxygen, but thanks to its unique physical properties, a bubble will also collect some of the oxygen molecules dissolved in the surrounding water. In effect, the bubble acts as a physical gill, replenishing its supply of oxygen through the physics of passive diffusion. The larger the surface area of the bubble, the more efficiently this system works. An insect can remain underwater as long as the volume of oxygen diffusing into the bubble is greater than or equal to the volume of oxygen consumed by the insect. Unfortunately, the size of the bubble shrinks over time as nitrogen slowly diffuses out into the water. When the bubble's surface area decreases, its rate of gas exchange also decreases. Eventually, the bubble becomes too small to keep up with metabolic demands and the insect must renew the entire bubble by returning to the water's surface. Plastrons. A plastron is a special array of rigid, closely spaced hydrophobic hairs, setae, that create an airspace next to the body. Air trapped within a plastron operates as a physical gill, just like air in a bubble, but this airspace cannot shrink in volume because the fortress of setae prevents encroachment of surrounding water. When the insect consumes oxygen, it creates a partial pressure deficit inside the plastron. This deficit is corrected by dissolved oxygen that diffuses in from the water. As nitrogen gradually diffuses out of the bubble, it creates a similar partial pressure deficit. But there is very little dissolved nitrogen present in water. It has a lower solubility potential than oxygen, so some of the nitrogen's partial pressure deficit is corrected by oxygen. In effect, the plastron trades some of the nitrogen for oxygen, keeping a constant volume of gas that may slowly become enriched with oxygen. The constant volume of a plastron's air supply eliminates the periodic need to surface and replenish the bubble. Insects that remain permanently submerged, X. Riffle beetles, family Elmidae, or lack the ability to reach the surface, X. Eggs of floodwater mosquitoes, are likely to have plastrons. These structures are often visible underwater as thin, silvery films of air covering parts of the body surface. Hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a respiratory pigment that facilitates the capture of oxygen molecules. It is an essential component of all human red blood cells, but it occurs only rarely in insects, most notably in the larvae of certain midges, family Chironomidae, known as bloodworms. These distinctive red worms usually live in the muddy depths of ponds or streams where dissolved oxygen may be in short supply. Under normal aerobic conditions, hemoglobin molecules in the blood bind and hold a reserve supply of oxygen. Whenever conditions become anaerobic, the oxygen is slowly released by the hemoglobin for use by the cells and tissues of the body. This backup supply may only last a few minutes, but it's usually long enough for the insect to under normal hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a respiratory pigment that facilitates the capture of oxygen molecules. It is an essential component of all human red blood cells, but it occurs only rarely in insects, most notably in the larvae of certain midges, family Chironomidae, known as bloodworms. These distinctive red worms usually live in the muddy depths of ponds or streams where dissolved oxygen may be in short supply. Under normal aerobic conditions, hemoglobin molecules in the blood bind and hold a reserve supply of oxygen. Whenever conditions become anaerobic, the oxygen is slowly released by the hemoglobin for use by the cells and tissues of the body. This backup supply may only last a few minutes, but it's usually long enough for the insect to move into more oxygenated water. Respiration in aquatic insects. Insect-plant interdependence coevolution by Janet. Coevolution, process of reciprocal evolutionary change that occurs between pairs of species or among groups of species as they interact with one another. Introduction. Filled square huge number species of flowering plants on our planet, approximately 275,000, is thought to be the result of adaptive radiation driven by the coevolution between plants and their beneficial animal pollinators. Filled square fossil record shows that pollination originated 250 million years ago. Filled square some plants have evolved with their pollinators and produce olfactory messages which make them unique for their specific pollinators. Filled square furthermore, insect herbivores can drive real-time ecological and evolutionary change in plant populations. Filled square some insect taxa feed on plants with the compounds and reduce plant fitness. Filled square mutation, recombination introduce more compounds. Filled square insect feeding is reduced and toxicity in plants is selected. Filled square the plant taxon goes through adaptive radiation. Filled square insects evolve tolerance or attraction to the novel compound and tend to specialize on plants with that taxon. The insect taxon goes through adaptive radiation. Filled square the cycle is repeated, resulting more phytochemicals and more feeding specialization. Mutualism, plant pollinator system. Pollination, flowering plant, angiosperm, and animals have co-evolved, or at least affect each other to some degree, to use each other to accomplish feeding and reproductive needs. Filled square the plant feeds the pollinator and the pollinator accomplishes the pollen transfer for the plant. Filled square host non-host odor recognition. The way in which insects use plant volatiles to recognize their host plants usually involves blends of commonly occurring volatiles in specific combinations or ratios. Filled square blend combinations play a crucial role as evidenced by a study with host odors of the black bean aphid, Apis fabi, in which odors presented individually in an olfactometer were repellent but when put together as a blend became attractive. Filled square combination of olfactory and filled square blend combinations play a crucial role as evidenced by a study with host odors of the black bean aphid, Apis fabi, in which odors presented individually in an olfactometer were repellent but when put together as a blend became attractive. Filled square combination of olfactory and visual cues can further enhance attraction. Filled square how insect responses change over time. Filled square insects have a nervous system and the capacity to learn, which has consequences for their responses to plant volatiles. Filled square learning behavior, such as when an odor is associated with a reward. Filled square blend combinations play a crucial role as evidenced by a study with host odors of the black bean aphid, Apis fabi, in which odors presented individually in an olfactometer were repellent but when put together as a blend became attractive. Filled square combination of olfactory and visual cues can further enhance attraction. Filled square how insect responses change over time. Filled square insects have a nervous system and the capacity to learn, which has consequences for their responses to plant volatiles. Filled square learning behavior, such as when an odor is associated with a reward, can affect the strength or even the type of response to plant stimuli. Filled square example, hawk moths Manduca sexta are innately attracted to blends of particular night-blooming flowers, but, when there are not enough of these hawk moth-adapted flowers in the habitat, moths learn to associate the odors of bat-pollinated agave palmari flowers which have a completely different smell. Filled square processing of stimuli through two olfactory channels, one involving an innate bias and the other a learned association, allows the moths to exist within a changing environment. Incompatibility. Filled square coevolution of insect and plant may even requires, if the plant avoids self-fertilization. Filled square to avoid close inbreeding and to protect the genetic variation produced by sexual reproduction, evolution of self-compatibility alleles was extremely important means to prevent self-fertilization. Filled square flowering plants to prevent inbreeding and to encourage outbreeding, facilitate coevolution with insects. Obligate pollination. Obligate pollination. Filled square obligate pollination. Neither party can survive without the other. Pairwise co-evolution. Filled square. Two of the most famous are filled square figs fig wasps and filled square yuccas yucca moths tegaticula. Filled square tightly covolved mutualism. Filled square larva or seed or flower eater. Filled square the filled square the challenge of host recognition. Filled square herbivorous insects need to discriminate between host and non-host and to select good quality hosts. Filled square hosts already attacked by other insects may have defenses induced and be lower quality. Antagonistic interactions. Filled square but one benefits, another harmed. Filled square antagonistic insectivory. Filled square over 600 types of carnivorous plants grouped under Venus's flytrap, pitcher plant, sundew, butterwort. Filled square live in swampy nitrogen-poor wetlands, which does not provide enough of the nutrients that plants need. Filled square passively attract, trap, and digest, eat unsuspecting victim with plant juices. Plant Plant defense. Filled square plants have had to defend themselves against insect attack. Filled square being rooted to the ground, they are unable to flee from attacking herbivores. Filled square they have evolved a wide range of sophisticated defense systems to protect their tissues. Filled square these include toxic or anti-feed and secondary metabolites that represent a major barrier to herbivora and physical defenses such as lignin. Filled square these provide direct defense via toxic, anti-nutritive or repellent effects on herbivores. Filled square plant defenses are orchestrated both in time and space by highly complex regulatory networks that themselves are further modulated by interactions with other signaling pathways. Filled square defenses can be constitutive or induced. Filled square constitutive defenses that are always present regardless of the presence of herbivora, e.g. cuticle, wax, spines, etc. Filled square induced defenses that are only produced when there is feeding by an herbivore, e.g. a HR hypersensitive reaction, secondary metabolites. Filled square primed plants respond more quickly and strongly when they are attacked again. Filled square metabolites and energy can, thus, be more efficiently allocated to defensive activities when there is a mechanism for recognizing the herbivore challenge and triggering precise timing of the adaptive modulation of the plant's metabolism. Reference. Filled